It was 2 years ago, but I remember every second of that ride. Some things just don't leave you. I was working late, trying to make a little extra cash driving for a rideshare service. The request popped up, a pickup at this old house on the edge of town. I almost didn't take it. The place had a bad reputation. People said it had been empty for years, but every now and then someone would see a light flicker inside or hear strange noises coming from it. Still, money was money. I pulled up to the house and I swear just looking at it made my skin crawl. The windows were dark, the wood was rotting, and the whole place leaned slightly, like it was tired of standing. Then the front door creaked open, and out stepped an old woman, hunched over, dressed in a thick shawl. She moved slowly, like every step was a struggle. But she wasn't alone. Holding her hand was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with long, dark hair and wide eyes. She looked up at me as they approached the car, her face pale, almost too pale. I unlocked the doors and the old woman climbed into the back seat, settling in with a heavy sigh. The little girl slid in beside her. "Good evening," the old woman said, her voice dry, like leaves crunching underfoot. "Evening," I replied, forcing a polite smile. For the first few minutes, the ride was quiet. The old woman just stared out the window, but the little girl, she watched me through the rearview mirror. I could feel her eyes on me, unblinking. Then in the smallest voice she spoke. "Do you drive people a lot?" she asked. I chuckled, relieved to break the silence. "Yeah, all the time. It's my job." "Do you ever get scared driving alone at night?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering. "Sometimes, I guess, but I've gotten used to it." She tilted her head. "What's the scariest thing that ever happened to you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the old woman cut in. "Who are you talking to?" I blinked. "The girl," I said, motioning toward the back seat. The old woman's face twisted in confusion. "What girl?" My stomach dropped. I flicked my eyes to the mirror, and suddenly, the seat next to her was empty. The little girl was gone. My hands tightened on the wheel. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wanted to turn around to look directly at the back seat, but some deep primal fear told me not to. The rest of the ride was silent. The old woman didn't say another word. Neither did I. I just kept driving, my knuckles white. When I finally pulled up to the retirement home, the old woman got out slowly, clutching the door for support. Before she shut it, she looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she murmured. Then, after a pause, she added, "She likes you." And with that, she turned and walked inside. I whipped my head around, scanning the back seat. Nothing. No sign of the little girl. No sign she'd ever been there at all. I drove off faster than I should have, heart pounding. When I finally dared to glance at my rearview mirror again, I swore I saw something. Just for a second. A pair of wide, pale eyes staring back at me. Then they were gone. I never picked up a ride from that part of town again. I had only been driving for this rideshare company for a week when I picked up a passenger I shouldn't have. It was close to midnight, and I was getting tired, but one more ride meant a little more money. The request came from an address on the edge of town, a place I'd never been before. The moment I turned onto the street, I regretted accepting the ride. The house was old. Not just old, rotting. The porch sagged, the windows were covered in grime, and the front yard was nothing but dead grass and weeds. No lights were on. It looked abandoned. I swallowed hard and waited. A minute later, the front door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothes that looked almost too big for him. His head was down, but as he got closer, I saw his face in the glow of the streetlight. Pale. Hollow. His eyes were sunken, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He slid into the back seat without a word. Before I could even greet him, he pulled out his phone and made a call. I tried not to listen, but the silence in the car made his words feel even louder. "It's done," he said, his voice low and scratchy. A long pause. Then he gave a short laugh. "No, they don't know yet, but they will." I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel tighter. My mouth felt dry. "They won't find the rest of her," he continued. "It's already taken care of." My stomach dropped. I must have twitched or flinched because I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. He was staring at me now. My heart pounded. I focused on driving, trying to act normal, but my mind was racing. Who was he talking about? Who was her? "Yeah," he said, smirking. "I'm in a car now. Driver looks nervous. Cold fear spread through me. Then he chuckled again. Relax, he doesn't know anything. My hands started to sweat. I thought about stopping, making up some excuse to end the ride, but I didn't want to risk it. He could hurt me. I forced myself to breathe. I had to get through this. We drove in silence for a few minutes. He hung up the call, but the air in the car was thick with something heavy. Something wrong. Then, finally, his destination appeared on my screen, a gas station just outside town. Relief washed over me. A public place. Bright lights. People. I pulled in, barely stopping before he opened the door and stepped out. For a second, he just stood there, staring at me through the open door. Then he smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "You're a good driver," he said. "Smart, too." I didn't answer. I couldn't. He shut the door and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the gas station's lights. I sat there, heart hammering, hands shaking. Then my phone buzzed. A new ride request. I declined. I was done for the night. And maybe, just maybe, I was done for good. I had been doing rideshare driving for about a year when this happened. It was Halloween night, and the city was alive with flashing lights, laughter, and people in costumes flooding the sidewalks. I had spent most of the night picking up partygoers, some too drunk to give me proper directions, others too excited to sit still. But none of them unsettled me. Not like the couple I picked up around midnight. Their request popped up while I was waiting downtown, right in the middle of the city. I didn't need to ask where they were headed. I had already seen it on the app. Cemetery Hill. I hesitated before accepting. That place was a town over, surrounded by nothing but woods and legends. People claimed it was haunted, that strange things happened there on Halloween night. But it was just a cemetery, right? When I pulled up to the pickup spot, I spotted them right away. A man and a woman standing too still on the sidewalk. They were dressed in all black, old-fashioned clothes, almost like they had stepped out of another century. The woman wore a long, lacy veil, and the man's suit looked almost too perfect, like it belonged in a funeral parlor. They slid into the back seat without a word. The city lights flickered across my rearview mirror as I pulled away from the curb. The streets were still crowded, but as I drove further, the noise of the city faded. A few minutes passed in silence before the man finally spoke. "Do you know why we're going to Cemetery Hill?" I forced a chuckle. "I figure people go there for two reasons, to visit the dead or to mess around." The woman giggled softly. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was slow, almost deliberate. "We're getting married," she said. I gripped the wheel a little tighter. "Oh, congratulations," I said, my voice coming out more awkward than I intended. Bit of a strange place for a wedding, though. "The veil is thin tonight," the man said, his voice low. "The spirits will be watching." A cold chill ran down my spine. I swallowed and kept driving. The city was far behind us now, the roads darker, the streetlights fewer. The silence in the car thickened. I didn't dare check the mirror. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't want to see their faces. Then the woman spoke again. "The ritual must be completed before midnight." Something about the way she said it made my hands sweat. "Ritual?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "The binding ritual," the man said. "A love that transcends life and death requires a sacrifice." Sacrifice. I almost hit the brakes right there. I wanted to turn around, to kick them out of my car, but we were in the middle of nowhere now. Just trees and darkness. If they were dangerous, I was trapped. I kept driving, my heartbeat loud in my ears. When the cemetery finally came into view, my stomach twisted. The wrought iron gates stood open, swallowed in thick fog. My headlights barely pierced through it. "We're here," the man said softly. I unlocked the doors, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The woman leaned forward slightly, her veil brushing against the back of my seat. "You should leave," she whispered, "before midnight." I didn't need to be told twice. They stepped out without another word and walked toward the cemetery. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I hit the gas and sped away, my tires skidding on the gravel. I told myself they were just a weird couple. Maybe goths, maybe some thrill seekers playing up the Halloween vibes. But something about them, something about the way they spoke, the way they moved, it didn't feel like an act. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling, so I checked the news. A body had been found at Cemetery Hill, a fresh grave. And when I opened my rideshare app, that trip was gone. No record of the ride, no history of the request. It was like they had never been there at all. I don't drive on Halloween